On her 63rd birthday, her son gave her a cookbook titled Simple Meals for Lonely Women. Marianne Whitaker didn't blink. She served him cake, smiled for the photos, and rewrote her estate before sunrise. By the time he sobered up, his name was gone from her will, her trust, and her future. He called it petty. She called it paid in full. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Backyard Birthday Cookout. Marianne's turning 63. The backyard smelled like charcoal and sunscreen, and somewhere beneath it all, the familiar tang of sliced onions from the burger tray. A portable speaker on the picnic table played an old Doobie Brothers track, too low to compete with Jason's voice booming across the lawn. Marianne sat under the striped awning Molly had hauled out from the shed, fanning herself with a napkin. Her pale blue blouse clung slightly at the back from the heat. 63 today. The number felt both too high and somehow not high enough. The folding table was cluttered with Solo cups, mustard bottles, and a sheet cake from Costco that said, "Happy Birthday, Marianne," in red frosting so bright it looked like it could stain skin. She hadn't wanted a party, but Molly said it would be good to have people around. "Celebrate a new chapter," she'd said, gently but firmly, just something small. Gloria was plating hot dogs with her usual quiet efficiency, while Amber sat slouched in a lawn chair, scrolling on her phone, painted nails gleaming like tiny mirrors. Jason had appointed himself grill master, even though he hadn't touched raw meat in years. He mostly drank beer and made commentary. "All right," Jason called out, patting his stomach. "We all stuffed yet. Time for presents before cake, right?" Marianne gave a small, obliging smile. "Sure, if someone actually brought one." Jason raised a single finger. "I did. And it's pretty perfect, if I say so myself." He disappeared for a moment, then returned with a rectangular package wrapped in silver paper that was wrinkled at the corners, like it had been done in a rush. He walked it over with a little bow. "For your next chapter," he said, grinning as he handed it to her. Marianne accepted it with both hands, her bracelets clinking gently. She didn't rush. Her fingers moved slowly over the tape, careful not to tear the paper more than she had to. Inside was a paperback book. The cover featured a bland kitchen counter and a solo place setting. Simple Meals for Lonely Women. There was a small pause. Amber let out a quick, breathy snort that she tried to swallow. Jason chuckled and added, "You can finally stop pretending anyone's coming for dinner." Molly's head snapped up. "Jason," she said sharply. Gloria stopped mid-scoop of baked beans, her jaw tensed. Marianne looked down at the book. Her thumb brushed across the corner of the cover. For a moment, her face gave away nothing. Then a soft, tight smile. "Well," she said lightly, "I'm sure it has great ideas for leftover chicken thighs." Jason laughed. "See? That's the spirit." Amber shook her head, still grinning. "Unbelievable," she muttered, not even pretending to hide it. Molly moved closer to her mother, resting her hand on the back of Marianne's chair. "You don't have to keep that," she murmured under her breath. Marianne's smile didn't waver. "It's just a book." She set it down beside her plastic cup, wiped her hands on her napkin, and stood. "Well," she said, "let's cut this cake before it melts straight through the table." She lifted the serrated knife and made clean, even slices, deliberate, practiced. No one offered to help. She plated the first slice and handed it to Gloria, then Jason, then Amber. She served herself last. "Big piece for the birthday girl," Jason joked, chewing with his mouth open. "I earned it," she said calmly. The conversation drifted into safe territory. Weather, traffic, Amber's minor fender bender last week. But the weight of the book sat quietly on the table, untouched. Gloria barely ate her cake. Molly didn't touch hers at all. Marianne sat and listened, nodding politely, eyes skimming the backyard. The wilting hydrangeas, the uneven fence line, the hummingbird feeder that hadn't seen visitors in weeks. The voices around her sounded like distant wind through trees, moving but meaningless. She reached for her fork and took a bite of cake, too sweet, too dry. Jason had moved on to beer number 4 and was now launching into a story about his HOA troubles. Something about fence height and nosy neighbors. Amber laughed in all the right places. Gloria stared at her plate. Molly leaned in, low voice. We can toss that book later. Marianne took another bite. Chewed. Swallowed. No, she said quietly. Leave it. She looked across the table at Jason. He was mid-rant, one hand waving through the air. Let him see me read it. The next morning, Marianne sat at the kitchen table with a yellow mug of lukewarm coffee and the trust documents spread out beside the untouched birthday cake, now sweating slightly under its plastic lid. The frosting looked even more garish in daylight. She wore her glasses this time, the good ones, the pair she only used for contracts and complicated recipes. She turned each page slowly, reading every line like she was looking for a lie hidden between the ink. But there were no surprises. Jason, primary heir. Jason, default executor. Jason, full authority in the event of incapacitation. Her name was on every page, but her power was nowhere in it. She flipped back to the beginning, pressed her palm flat against the notary stamp like she could smudge it back into wet ink. It was Ethan's voice that answered the phone, familiar, steady, always a little too upbeat for this kind of work. Marianne, happy birthday again. Molly told me you had a big cookout yesterday. How can I help? She didn't waste time. I want a full amendment to the trust, she said. Executor, distribution, all of it. There was a pause on his end. She could hear him shifting in his chair, clicking a pen. Okay, do you want to talk through options or… I want Jason removed entirely, she said. Not reduced, removed. Another pause. Got it, Ethan said, his tone slipping into something more careful. Do you have someone else in mind for executor? Yes, she said. I do. She didn't say Gloria's name out loud. Not yet. It wasn't up for discussion. She hung up without asking for his opinion and turned her attention back to the table. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing in long, deliberate strokes. Not revenge, not bitterness, just order. Finally. The side door creaked open an hour later, and Gloria stepped in, holding a grocery bag in one hand and an iced coffee in the other. She took one look at the papers on the table and didn't even ask. Still got it memorized, don't you, she said, nodding toward the trust. Every word of that thing. I was there when we wrote it, Marianne said. Still doesn't mean I recognize the woman who signed it. Gloria pulled out a chair and sat. The bag crinkled as she set it on the floor. You tired of waiting for them to see your worth? Marianne shook her head slowly. Her voice was steady but not unkind. No, I'm tired of shrinking to keep their egos fed. She took a sip of cold coffee, eyes locked on the text in front of her. Gloria didn't say anything more. She just reached across the table and gently moved the cake to the far end, away from the documents. By mid-afternoon, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, just overdue. Marianne had just finished printing a draft of the amendment letter when her phone buzzed. Molly. It was a text. Sorry about Dad yesterday. He thinks he's funny. He doesn't know when to stop. Another buzz. He wouldn't have done it if he thought it would actually hurt you. He just doesn't think. Marianne stared at the screen for a long moment, thumbs motionless. Then she typed, You didn't laugh. That's enough. She didn't wait for a reply. Outside, the afternoon sun slipped behind the neighbor's dying oak, casting long shadows across the fence line. Marianne stood at the window and watched them stretch over the hydrangeas, over the patio stones, over everything she had quietly built and maintained, while Jason ran his mouth and Molly tried to make peace out of ashes. She was done waiting for them to notice her. Now she was making sure they'd never forget. The bank lobby was cold enough to make Marianne wish she'd brought a sweater, but she didn't ask for the thermostat to be changed. She was there for business, not comfort. The teller, a young woman with a nose ring and chipped blue polish, counted out the cashier's check twice before sliding it under the glass. Do you want a copy of the receipt, Ms. Whitaker? Yes, Marianne said. Then, after a moment, and an envelope, she stepped aside and sat at the writing counter. The receipt was crisp, still warm from the printer. She pulled a blue pen from her purse, the same kind she used to write grocery lists, garden tags, and annual holiday cards. Familiar, firm in her grip. On the back of the receipt, she wrote in careful cursive, Paid in full, so are you. She let the pen hang in the air for a moment after the last period, then slid the paper into the envelope and sealed it shut. No address. She didn't need to mail it. She'd hand it to Jason herself when the time came. Let him decide what it meant. That afternoon, Ethan sat at her dining table, suit jacket slung over the back of his chair, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He had his laptop open and a manila folder resting between them. Legal pads, notary stamps, and a few sheets that required wet signatures. Here's the trust amendment, he said, turning the document toward her. Jason's name is gone. Executor reassigned. Primary and contingent beneficiaries updated. Library fund and educational allocation routed directly through a holding structure with Gloria as point of contact. Molly's college savings is separate, like you asked. Marianne read it once, then again. Her glasses rested low on the bridge of her nose. She picked up the pen without ceremony. The ink flowed clean and steady across the page. Her hand didn't shake once. Gloria stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, one shoulder against the frame. "Happy birthday to you," she said softly. Marianne didn't look up. "Bit late." "You're right on time." When it was done, Ethan tapped the pages into a neat stack, his movements more respectful than formal. "I'll file everything today. By Friday, it's real." "Good," Marianne said, rising to walk him out. "Then we're done." "Almost," Ethan added, pausing at the front door. "You still want me to send a courtesy notice to Jason?" Marianne tilted her head slightly, considering. "Not yet," she said. "Let him wonder." That night, Marianne reheated leftover cornbread casserole and brought 2 plates to the table. Gloria was already pouring iced tea. "You know," Gloria said, setting down the pitcher, "you didn't owe him anything." "I know," Marianne replied, taking her seat. "That's what makes it worth doing." They ate without music, without television, without distraction. It was the first time in weeks the kitchen didn't feel like a stage. Midway through dinner, Marianne's phone buzzed against the table. She ignored it until she'd finished chewing. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "Go on," she said. "Let's see what the PR department cooked up this time." Marianne unlocked her screen, thumb moving slow. It was Amber. An Instagram story. The image was filtered to look like soft golden hour, though the light in Marianne's kitchen was overhead and fluorescent. The angle was from the corner of the table, close cropped, cutting out everyone but Amber, half of Molly's smile, and a slice of cake on a vintage plate that hadn't been used in years. The caption read, "Lovely dinner with family, so glad she's not alone." Marianne stared at the photo for a moment longer than she needed to. "That's not even from today," Gloria said, reading over her shoulder. "That's from the cookout." Marianne didn't respond. She just closed the app, set the phone face down, and took another sip of tea. "Let them curate," she said. "It doesn't make it true." Gloria smirked. "They're not going to see this coming." Marianne didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just nodded once, slowly, like someone settling into a chair after standing too long. "I'm not trying to hurt them," she said. Gloria nodded back. "That's what makes it land harder." Outside, the cicadas had gone quiet. A stillness pressed against the windows. It wasn't peace. It was clarity. The decision didn't come with ceremony. No dramatic flair, no wineglass in hand, no smirk of finality. Marianne simply opened her laptop one morning after watering the orchids and logged into her social media. She clicked through the platforms quietly. Facebook first. She unchecked the boxes next to her name on family photos. Thanksgiving 2017, Amber's graduation dinner, a blurry shot of Molly holding a sparkler beside Jason, his arm possessively around her shoulder. Untag, Instagram next. She opened Amber's account, scrolled past the birthday queen photo from last week, the one where the only part of Marianne visible was her forearm holding a cake knife, and tapped Remove Tag. LinkedIn was last. She didn't bother logging into her own account, just visited Jason's page. His bio was full of vague leadership jargon. Team first executive, results-driven strategist. Family matters most. She didn't like or comment. She never would again. Then she went to her settings. Deactivate. Confirm. The screen went white for a second, and then the account was gone. So was the noise. That afternoon, Gloria found her in the sunroom, sitting cross-legged on the rug, organizing a shallow plastic tub of old letters and photographs. "Went full ghost, huh?" Gloria asked. carrying in a glass of iced tea. Marianne didn't look up. She was sorting envelopes by decade. Her fingers moved with the same exactness she used to prune roses. "They won't notice," Marianne said. "Not right away?" Gloria sat beside her. "Bet they won't notice till the money stops." Marianne gave a faint smile. "That's not what this is about." "No," Gloria said. "But it'll be when they start paying attention." A beat passed between them. The ceiling fan creaked faintly overhead. Outside, a squirrel darted across the patio, knocking over one of Amber's forgotten glass candle holders. Marianne reached for a brown envelope labeled 8689, Jason. It was thick with photos. His childhood, missing teeth, neon shorts, crayon art held proudly in tiny hands. She shuffled through them until one slipped free and fluttered to the floor. Jason, age 6. Standing in front of his kindergarten class project. A cardboard model of a fire station with crooked red paint and a proudly misspelled sign. Station 3. His cheeks were full and ruddy, one shoe untied. On the back, in her own handwriting, "Everything I had was yours." She stared at it for a long moment, thumb pressed just below the words, like she could erase them through heat alone. Then, without hesitation, she stood. The fireplace had been unused for 2 winters, but it didn't take long to stir the embers back to life. Gloria didn't ask what was happening. She just fetched the matches. Marianne knelt by the hearth. She held the photo over the flame until the corner curled inward. Her hand was steady. She didn't drop it. She watched it blacken inch by inch until the ink warped, the face disappeared, and the paper crumbled to ash. When it was gone, she sat back and stared into the fire. "I used to think it was a compliment," she said softly. "To give everything." Gloria sat beside her on the floor, quiet. "It was a trap," Marianne added. "For me, for him, for everyone." They stayed there until the last embers sank into the coals. Later that week, Marianne met privately with the city's Library Foundation Board. No press, no nameplate, no photos. Just a quiet meeting in a side conference room where she handed over a certified check and a simple letter for the next generation who needs a place to feel safe. The donation was large enough to restore the children's wing, the one Jason used to run wild through every Saturday morning, while she returned overdue books, and Gloria sat cross-legged on the rug, reading Nancy Drew under the window. Marianne refused the plaque. She asked that the new mural be painted by local kids. No dedications, no spotlights, just shelves, stories, and color. When she came home, there was a card in the mail, thick stock, gold trim, sent from Jason's address. Inside, a generic thank you note for the birthday gift Amber had helped him pick. No mention of the book's title, no apology, no recognition. Tucked inside was a printed photo from the party, same one Amber had posted. This time, her full face was visible, Marianne mid-smile, mid-slice, mid-swallow. She looked neither joyful nor hurt, just present. On the back, Jason had written, "Thanks for being a good sport." She didn't bother burning it. She just tossed it in the recycling bin without breaking stride. That night, as the crickets chirped and the scent of dried basil hung in the warm kitchen air, Gloria looked up from the crossword and asked, "Do you feel done yet?" Marianne poured the last of the iced tea and sat. "No," she said calmly, "but I feel like I've stopped bleeding." The notary's pen made a sound Marianne had always loved, that faint, deliberate scratch against paper that meant something permanent was happening. The sound of ink deciding things. It was mid-morning, and the light from the dining room window fell in tidy rectangles across the oak table. Ethan sat across from her again, jacket off, tie loosened. Gloria stood by the counter with her arms crossed, a quiet witness. The papers were stacked neatly between them. Final drafts, no more red lines, no more placeholders. "This is it," Ethan said. "Once it's signed and sealed, there's no ambiguity." Marianne adjusted her glasses. "Ambiguity," she said, tasting the word. "That's what let them assume ownership of me." Ethan smiled faintly, professional but soft. "Then let's make sure there's none left." She picked up the pen, a weighty black barrel kind, the sort Jason would have bragged about owning. Her name flowed across the signature line like a thread pulled straight through cloth. Each letter came cleaner than the one before. When it was done, she lifted the page slightly, checked her signature, and nodded. "File it," she said. Ethan stamped, initialed, sealed. The sharp clap of his notary press echoed once, final and satisfying. He slipped the signed pages into a clear envelope and slid it across the table toward her. "I'll make certified copies and get everything logged with the clerk's office. Official by morning." "Good," Marianne said. "Then we can stop saying his name in this house." Gloria grinned. "Hallelujah to that." Ethan gathered his briefcase, thanked her again, and left. The sound of the front door closing was quiet but heavy, a hinge on a long story finally catching. That afternoon, the kitchen filled with the smell of lemons. Marianne stood by the counter, zesting fruit with the same focus she used to reserve for balancing checkbooks and calming quarrels. Sugar dusted the air, catching in the sunbeams. She worked in silence, her movements slow, deliberate, the way you cook when you no longer have anyone to impress. She stirred, poured, pressed the crust, and baked. The oven timer hummed its small countdown while she wiped the counter spotless. Gloria leaned against the door frame, sipping coffee. "You bake like you've got joy now," she said. Marianne smiled faintly, eyes still on the pan. "I bake like it's mine." They cooled the lemon bars on wire racks, their golden tops soft and gleaming. She cut them into perfect squares, arranged them on her old ceramic platter, the one Jason always said was too fussy for real food. "They used to say these tasted like sadness," Marianne murmured, sliding the tray into a paper box for delivery. Gloria laughed once, low and proud. "Then I hope sadness tastes this good at the library." By late afternoon, she'd driven to the downtown branch, the one with the half-finished mural and the scaffolding still up from repairs. Inside, the smell of paint and old paper hit her all at once, familiar and safe. The librarian, a young man in a tweed vest, greeted her like an old friend. "Mrs. Whitaker, we weren't expecting you today." "I just wanted to bring something sweet," she said, setting down the box. "For the staff." He lifted the lid, inhaled deeply. "Lemon bars. Haven't had these in forever." She smiled. "They're better when shared." Before leaving, she glanced toward the children's wing. Painters were finishing the final stretch of wall, bright sky blue, streaked with little handprints from the art class kids. The air was filled with laughter echoing between stacks. For a brief second, Marianne let herself stand there and simply exist. Not as someone's mother, widow, or obligation, just as herself, a woman who had quietly, methodically rewritten the ending of her own story. Back home, as the daylight thinned, her phone buzzed with a message. "Molly, did you do it?" Marianne smiled. She typed slowly, her fingers careful, her breathing steady. "Marianne, your name's in ink now. Don't tell anyone yet." 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. No reply came. That was fine. Some things didn't need fanfare. She placed the phone face down beside the cooling rack, wiped her hands on a towel, and exhaled. The air smelled of lemon and closure. By early evening, the house was still. The kind of stillness that felt earned. Gloria had gone home, leaving behind half a crossword and an empty coffee mug. The last light pooled on the dining table, where the now signed will sat sealed and stamped. Marianne poured herself a glass of water, took one sip, and looked out the window. The hydrangeas were wilting again. She'd water them in the morning. The phone buzzed once more. Jason. She stared at the screen. For the first time in months, there was no reflexive dread, only curiosity. His message read, "Can you spot me on property taxes this year?" Nothing else. No greeting, no punctuation. Just entitlement, plain as day. Marianne read it twice, then set the phone down gently beside the glass, wiped her palms on her apron, and turned off the kitchen light. Outside, the dusk settled low over the neighborhood, quiet, steady, indifferent. Inside, her will waited in its envelope, still warm from her signature. She smiled faintly to herself. Let him wonder what silence costs. The morning light was gray and steady, the kind that made time feel suspended. Marianne sat at her kitchen table again. The same oak surface that had held cake, contracts, and now something less symbolic but more damning. 8 years of bank statements, stacks of them, arranged by color-coded tabs. Gloria had insisted on bringing her printer from home so they could have everything in hard copy. You can't stare down what you don't make tangible, she'd said. Marianne adjusted her reading glasses and began marking each page with a highlighter. Every transfer, every online payment labeled County Treasurer's Office. Every temporary loan to Jason that had never returned. 6 out of 8 years, she murmured finally, tapping a line item dated last April. Gloria looked up from her calculator. You sure? Marianne slid a folder toward her. Check the totals. Gloria's fingers moved quickly, the quiet hum of addition filling the kitchen. When she finished, she let out a soft whistle. $63,289, she said. And some change. Marianne smiled without humor. Always some change. For a long moment, neither spoke. The refrigerator motor kicked on. A bird hit the glass outside and flew away unhurt. Jason had always said it wasn't dependence, just fairness. He'd phrase it like an act of mutual respect. You've got more liquid cash right now, Mom. I'll even it out next quarter. Then he'd forget the next quarter existed. Marianne reached for a blank sheet of paper from the printer tray. I'm tired of letting silence balance his books. She began to write, not a letter, not an explanation. Just facts. Property tax payments. Jay Whittaker residence, 2015, $7,800, 2016, $7,150, 2017, $8,250, 2018, $7,940, 2019, $7,915, 2021, $8,470. Subtotal, $48,325 interest-free support, as requested. Then below it, a second column, miscellaneous temporary loans. Car repairs, school supplies for Amber, networking dinners that always included top-shelf whiskey. Total, $63,289.74. At the bottom, she wrote one last line, centered, small, and neat. Balance, paid in full. She printed it once, folded it with surgical precision, and slipped it into a plain white envelope. No return address, no name. Only the sound of adhesive sealing beneath her thumb. Gloria leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. You're not sending that certified? No, Marianne said. He'll open it faster if he thinks it's casual. Gloria smirked. You really don't miss a move. It's not a move, Marianne said, standing. It's math. She placed the envelope atop the outgoing mail stack by the door, utility bill, library thank you note, and one quiet reckoning, dressed as correspondence. By the time the letter left the mailbox, Marianne felt lighter. Not happier, not vindicated. Just balanced. She didn't check the tracking. She didn't need proof it arrived. Some truths didn't require witnesses. That evening, she poured herself a glass of white wine and read in the sunroom. The air smelled faintly of lilac from the yard. And the only sound was the ticking clock on the mantel. She'd stopped thinking about whether Jason would understand. That was never the point. Gloria dropped by after dinner, as she often did now. She brought a stack of her own unpaid bills, joking that Marianne's new hobby might rub off on her. Tell me something, Gloria said as she sat. When you wrote that list, did it feel like revenge or housekeeping? Marianne thought for a moment. Neither, she said. It felt like telling the truth out loud for once. Gloria nodded. That's the cleanest kind of revenge. The next morning, Marianne was halfway through watering the hydrangeas when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She didn't recognize the number at first. It wasn't Jason's. Then she saw the contact name and paused. Amber. The message preview flashed across the screen. Amber, what's this about? Marianne wiped her hand on the towel, thumb hovering over the notification. She didn't open it yet. She didn't have to. The wind shifted through the yard, cool and early for the season, carrying the smell of wet soil. The hydrangeas drooped under their own weight. She stared at the phone until the message disappeared from the screen. Then she tucked it back into her apron pocket and went back to watering, slow, steady, deliberate. Some things, she thought, bloom best after drought. The Reddit post was uploaded at 2:03 a.m. The title was plain. Uncertain. My mother just sent me this. Is this normal? Attached was a photo. A single sheet of paper, neatly formatted. Faint crease marks from folding. Lines drawn across the years. Dollar amounts listed. Itemized. Documented in black ink. At the bottom, a quiet declaration. Balance. Paid in full. Within minutes, the comment section bloomed like wildfire. Curious, cutting, incredulous. Wait, your mom paid your property taxes for years, and you're just now asking if it's weird? Dude, she funded your life. You embarrassed yourself. You're the reason parents get burned out. This isn't normal, it's restraint. She didn't expose you, she closed her tab. The post climbed fast, upvoted, screenshotted, retweeted with surgical precision. No names, no locations, just a generic handle. Amber is tired. A throwaway account probably. But the damage was kinetic. By 8:45 a.m., Molly was in Jason's living room, phone in hand. I told you not to text her, she snapped, waving the screen. Now it's everywhere. Jason stood barefoot by the kitchen island, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I didn't post it. Amber did. Oh, great. Your daughter leaked your mom's financial list, and now it's national content. Good job. He looked at the ceiling, then back down. She was upset. She thought it was manipulative. No, she thought it was accountability. And now the entire internet agrees. Molly scrolled again, jaw clenched. You let this fester. You never thanked her. You never paid her back. You didn't even warn me she was covering our tax bill for 6 years. I looked like a freeloader, Jason snapped. I was going to pay her back. When? In what century? Molly shot back. When you finished landscaping the backyard? Or after the second fantasy football buy-in? He didn't respond. She set the phone down, face up. The screen showed another comment, now pinned by popularity. Your mom didn't send you a bill. She sent you the truth. You just weren't ready for it. Jason swiped it off the screen and turned away. It was a private letter. Molly's voice was cold. Then maybe you should have treated it like one. Across town, Marianne sat at her breakfast nook with a newspaper she wasn't reading. She'd known something was off the moment her landline rang, and the caller ID flashed unknown. Amber's voice had cracked as soon as she spoke. I can't believe you'd post that. I mean, how petty can you be? Marianne didn't interrupt. She just let the words settle like sediment in a glass of water. Amber continued, louder. You humiliated him. My dad. Your son. People from my school are sending me screenshots. Marianne sipped her coffee, then set the mug down with care. I didn't post anything, Amber. Right, Amber said. But you gave it to him, knowing he'd flip. Knowing he'd probably show someone. You knew it'd get out. I gave him a copy of the truth, Marianne said evenly. That's not the same as a press release. Amber scoffed. It's public shaming. You wanted people to see what a martyr you are. Marianne's voice didn't rise. If I wanted revenge, I'd have sent the receipts to the IRS, or the HOA, or you, 2 years ago, when you borrowed my car and dented it. Silence. Then Marianne added, but I didn't. Because I thought maybe one of you would grow into someone who could carry a little shame without falling apart. The line went dead. Later that afternoon, Gloria found her in the garden, pulling weeds with slow, angry purpose. They're turning on each other, Gloria said, by way of greeting. Marianne didn't look up. Saw it coming. Amber posted the original, right? Marianne nodded once. Well, someone figured that out. And now she's claiming her account was hacked. Meanwhile, Jason's gone radio silent and Molly's on Facebook deleting old vacation photos like it's gonna erase the timeline. Marianne sat back on her heels, wiping her gloves on her jeans. I didn't ask for a spectacle. You didn't need one, Gloria said. The paper did the talking. Marianne reached for her water bottle. It wasn't about the money. I know. She stood. Slow and stiff. It was about the math. About keeping score when no one else was willing to admit there was a game. Gloria glanced at her phone. Jason blocked you. Marianne blinked. He did? Yep. Texts bounce. Calls go straight to voicemail. You're on the outer circle now. She almost smiled. Finally. They stood in silence, watching as a breeze stirred the dry leaves along the edge of the porch. Think he'll come around? Gloria asked. And Marianne's answer was quiet but certain. Not while the truth still burns his tongue. The wind picked up. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped and silenced itself. The smell of pine and old mulch rose from the lawn. The hydrangeas were blooming again. Just then, Gloria's phone buzzed. She glanced down and frowned. What? Marianne asked. Gloria hesitated, then handed it over. A new post. Same handle. Not Amber. She wasn't the only one he owed. Guess it's time we all sent our invoices. Below it, a photo, another printed ledger. Different handwriting, same surname. Marianne stared at the screen. Then her jaw set, and without a word, she turned and walked inside. It was just after dusk when Marianne opened the front door and found Molly on the porch, suitcase in hand. She didn't look like someone arriving, more like someone retreating. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun that had collapsed on one side. The sleeves of her blazer were wrinkled from too many hours in it. She didn't say hi, didn't ask if now was a good time. She just lifted her eyes and said softly, "It's tense at home. Can I stay a few days?" Marianne didn't hesitate. She stepped aside. "Your old room's been an office since 2019, she said. "But we can fix that." Gloria was over within the hour, hammering out small talk to fill the silence that hung between Marianne and Molly like fog. She brought extra sheets, a box fan, and a plug-in nightlight shaped like a lighthouse. "Just in case you forgot the hallway gets dark after 10, Gloria said, giving Molly a tired smile. Still afraid of shadows under the stairs, Molly smiled weakly. "Maybe." Marianne didn't press her. Instead, she made dinner. Chicken and wild rice casserole, the kind with sour cream and French fried onions, and a side of steamed green beans with cracked pepper. Molly had loved it at 10 and tolerated it at 15. Now, at 26, she said nothing and served herself seconds. They ate in silence except for the gentle sound of fork tines against ceramic. It wasn't until their plates were nearly cleared that Molly spoke. "I don't want to live like them." Marianne didn't look up right away. She took another sip of her iced tea, swirling the ice as she considered her response. When she finally did speak, her voice was quiet but grounded. "Then don't make excuses for cruelty. That's where it always starts." Molly nodded once, then again, more slowly, like something internal had finally snapped into alignment. After dinner, Gloria stayed to help remake the guest room. They stripped the old futon mattress and found a set of dusty fairy lights still pinned to the windowsill, remnants of a long-ago sleepover Marianne barely remembered. "You want these still?" Gloria asked, plugging them in to check. The bulbs flickered weakly, but enough light spilled across the room to soften its edges. Molly touched one of the lights. "Yeah, leave them." Marianne brought in fresh towels, folded tightly like hotel linen, and placed a tiny mint on the pillow without saying a word. Later, when everything was finally quiet, she stood in the doorway holding something behind her back. "You remember this?" she asked. She stepped into the room and held up a worn hardcover copy of Goodnight Moon. The edges were frayed, the spine taped once in the middle. There was a grease stain on page 6 and a bent corner on page 10. Probably Molly's doing, long ago. Molly exhaled a laugh. "Wow, I thought you gave that to the library." Marianne sat down at the edge of the bed. "Almost did, but something told me you'd need it more than they would." She opened the cover and turned to the first page. "In the great green room," she began, her voice gentler than usual, "there was a telephone and a red balloon." Molly rested her head against the pillow, watching the string of lights flicker above her. They stayed like that, in a hush made sacred by the memory of simpler nights. Before debts, before resentment, before adults grew cruel in slow, defensible ways. When Marianne finished, she closed the book and placed it on the nightstand. Molly looked at her. "Thank you." Marianne reached over and smoothed back a strand of hair. "Start different," she said softly. "And keep your receipts." Molly blinked. "Receipts?" "For kindness, for boundaries. For the days you decide not to repeat someone else's damage. Keep a record, so no one makes you doubt who you are." A beat passed, then another. "Is it weird that I feel relieved?" Molly asked. Marianne stood. "No. It means you were carrying things that weren't yours." She walked to the door and flicked off the main light, leaving only the soft string of fairy bulbs to guard the room. Before she closed the door, Molly spoke again, voice thin but steady. "He's going to blame you for all of it now." Marianne's hand paused on the doorknob. "I know, and me too, probably." "Then we're finally even," she said. "He blamed me when I gave. Now he can blame me when I stop." The door clicked shut with a soft finality. Down the hall, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Gloria had just sent a photo. Another ledger, new handwriting, line item. College semester. Paid, no questions asked. Recipient, Jason Whitaker. From Uncle Ron. Underneath it, a caption. Thought I was the only one. Guess not. Marianne turned the phone face down. And for the first time in a long while, let herself imagine what truth might look like, multiplied. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. Just her name typed neatly above the street number she'd lived at since 1984. Inside, a polite letter from a local elder law firm and an attached form scheduling a capacity evaluation for October 3rd. At the request of your son, Mr. Jason Whitaker. Marianne read the letter once, then again, and finally folded it with slow precision, setting it beside her cup of chamomile tea. Gloria arrived 15 minutes later, winded from the uphill walk, and spotted it the second she entered. What the hell is that? Marianne slid the letter across the table. By the time Gloria reached the end, her voice had gone tight with fury. He's testing your competency? After the taxes you paid, the child you raised, the casseroles you baked for his divorce lawyer, this is what he tries? Marianne didn't blink. He thinks I'm unraveling, and he's hoping someone with a clipboard will say so on paper. Please tell me you're not going. Oh, I'm going, she said, standing, but I'm bringing my own clipboard. The evaluation took place in a bland office suite above a dentist's clinic, the kind of place where time sat still and the carpet always smelled faintly of Lysol and surrender. The attorney, a man named Ethan Rollins, had the pleasant but vacant demeanor of someone who spent his days diffusing family landmines. He offered her tea. She declined. He asked about her medications, daily habits, the president, the year, her date of birth. She recited each detail without a pause, even offering the day of the week she was born. Wednesday, she said. My mother used to say that's why I was stubborn. He smiled politely. Do you know why you're here today, Ms. Whitaker? I'm here because my son doesn't like the fact that I stopped financing his denial, she said calmly. He wants to paint me as confused, so he can tell himself I've lost something he never earned. Ethan didn't write that down, but his mouth twitched slightly. And how would you describe your current state of mind? Clearer than it's been in years, she said, and inconvenient, apparently. 3 days later, the letter of results arrived. No evidence of cognitive decline, no indication of undue influence. Recommendation, full decisional capacity retained. Marianne pinned it to her corkboard beneath a postcard from Molly's trip to Maine and an expired coupon for dry cleaning. That afternoon, Jason's formal complaint, filed with the county's Adult Protective Services, was quietly dismissed. Molly found out through a text from a classmate. Amber had posted a cryptic story on her Instagram account, written in white serif font over a sepia photo of a lighthouse. Some people weaponize memory to feel powerful. Doesn't make it truth. No names, no tags. But the tone was unmistakable. Gloria saw it too. She held her phone up like a torch. You see this mess? Marianne was out in the garden, sleeves rolled up, trimming back the rosemary that had overtaken the planter boxes. I saw it. She's aiming that at you. I know, Gloria scowled. They're flailing. Marianne clipped another sprig, methodical and unrushed. And I'm flying, that made Gloria smile. Damn right you are. At the kitchen table later that evening, Marianne pulled out the legal pad she kept in the drawer under the coffee filters. Her handwriting was small but steady. At the top of the page she wrote, Codicil to Living Will, October 6th. Below that she wrote a single sentence. I designate Molly Whitaker as my healthcare proxy, effective immediately. She paused, then added a second line, softer in tone. This is not an act of punishment. It's a recognition of character. She signed it in front of Gloria, who handed her the notary kit they'd borrowed from the library's legal kiosk. They worked in silence, the sound of the stamp echoing faintly in the kitchen. When it was done, Marianne folded the page and slipped it into the accordion folder labeled Essentials. It slid in right next to her medical directive and her list of emergency contacts. Gloria poured 2 small glasses of whiskey. No toast, no speech, just the quiet clink of glass on glass. You sure she's ready? Gloria asked. She's more than ready, Marianne replied. She just needed permission to stop pretending she wasn't. They drank. Later that night, after Molly had gone to bed and Gloria had left, Marianne wandered into the sunroom with a blanket and a copy of Persuasion. She wasn't in the mood to read, but she liked holding the weight of it. The spine cracked faintly when she opened it. like the house exhaling. The air smelled like lavender and last cuts of fall grass. The quiet held. Until the knock came. It was soft at first, then louder. She rose, not alarmed, just curious. The porch light was off. She clicked it on and opened the door. A woman stood there, mid-50s, well-dressed in a wool coat and low heels. Her expression was strained, the kind that held both apology and ammunition. "Mrs. Whitaker," Marianne nodded slowly. "Yes?" The woman extended a manila envelope, heavy with contents. "I'm from the law offices of Gilman and Tate. I've been asked to deliver this by your late husband's sister." Marianne's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "My sister-in-law." "She passed last year," the woman said. "But this was part of her estate instructions. She wanted it delivered directly to you after a certain threshold was crossed." Marianne took the envelope, pulse steady. "What threshold?" The woman hesitated. "When Jason contested your competence." And with that, she turned and left. Marianne stood alone on the porch, envelope in hand, moonlight sharp against her fingers. She didn't open it, not yet, but she would. She already knew some ledgers took decades to balance, and others were buried. The sky was high and blue and almost too clean for October, a kind of weather that made things feel simpler than they were. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze, thick and red and glossy, stretched between two poles just outside the new children's wing of the Eastbrook Public Library. The building was modest, brick and cedar trim, but inside it carried the smell of fresh paint, new carpet, and hope cataloged by call number. Sunlight poured through high windows that hadn't yet been smudged by small hands. There were no reporters, no news crews. Just neighbors, volunteers, a few scattered parents clutching coffee cups. A local Girl Scout troop had brought brownies wrapped in cling film. Marianne stood near the edge of the crowd in a soft navy cardigan and pearl earrings that had once belonged to her mother. She didn't hover, didn't network, just watched as the director of the library gave a short welcome, thanked the board, then gestured toward the new bronze plaque mounted near the Story Circle's entrance. A small hush rippled through the crowd as the fabric cover was lifted. The plaque read, "In honor of the quiet builders. For the ones who gave before they were asked, who planted trees they'd never sit under, whose names didn't shout, they steadied." At the bottom, us in simple serif, dedicated by Marianne Whitaker and Friends of Eastbrook Library, October 2025. There was no speech from her, no fanfare, just a pause as she let herself breathe it in. The reality of something solid, something that would outlive the noise. Then she stepped through the archway, into the reading nook padded with beanbags and child-sized chairs, and took her seat on the small stage. The book in her lap was Blueberries for Sal, worn around the edges, library binding cracked slightly. She opened it and read. The children sat cross-legged in front of her, some leaning forward, some already munching on brownies. A few parents stood in the back, quiet, phone cameras discreet. Marianne didn't perform. She didn't pitch her voice or add sparkle. She simply told the story the way she had once told it to Jason, and later to Molly, word by word, rhythm by rhythm, like offering a kind of weatherproof love. Outside, a volunteer rang the brass bell to mark the formal opening of the wing. Inside, the children laughed at little Sal, dropping blueberries into her pail. Kerplink, kerplank, kerplunk. And Marianne's voice remained steady through it all. Jason found out that night from a co-worker's wife. They were scrolling through a neighborhood group post about the ribbon cutting. A few photos had been uploaded. Marianne sitting on the tiny stool, reading, kids giggling, parents nodding along. One photo showed the plaque in full. Someone had captioned it, "She's always been that kind of person, just quiet about it." Jason stared at it for a long time, then at his phone, then back at nothing. "No one told me," he muttered. Molly, who had walked in just in time to hear it, stood in the doorway of the den, arms crossed. She didn't want to make a show of it. Jason looked up, irritated. "You're saying a plaque isn't a show?" She didn't name herself. She didn't even speak. She just built the room and filled it with books. He scoffed, gesturing to the phone. "You'd think she was some kind of hero." Molly's eyes didn't flinch. "To them, she is." Jason opened his mouth, then shut it again. Somewhere down the hallway, Amber's voice echoed faintly. She was on the phone with someone, probably venting. Jason sat back in his chair, face unreadable. His knee bounced. He didn't ask what the plaque said, didn't ask what book she read or whether Gloria had been there. He just muttered, "She always liked the spotlight more than she pretended." Molly smiled, not kindly. "No," she said. "She just earned what you thought should be yours." Back in Eastbrook, the kids had gone home. The chairs were stacked, the brownies mostly gone, except the few the Girl Scouts smuggled back into their troop leader's purse. Marianne sat quietly at one of the long window benches in the new wing, watching dusk begin its slow descent. The library director came by to thank her again, voice low, warm with meaning. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. Marianne smiled faintly. "That's the point. Quiet builders never have to. They just do." The director nodded, moved away. Marianne turned the last page of Blueberries for Sal and closed the cover. She didn't look back at the plaque. She didn't need to. But when she left, she paused in the vestibule and picked up a small manila envelope from the front desk. Inside, a copy of the original architectural sketch of the children's wing, dated 5 years earlier. And in the top corner, handwritten in pencil, one note from the donor's anonymous memo line. "For the ones who plant in silence." She slipped it into her bag. At home, Molly was waiting on the porch with 2 mugs of hot cider and an envelope of her own. She held it up. "It's from Uncle Ron," she said. Marianne took it slowly. "What's in it?" she asked. Molly looked toward the darkening street. "His ledger," she said. "But the last page has your name on it." The first scent was garlic, not burned, not rushed, just golden, slowly blooming in oil as it should. Marianne stirred it with a wooden spoon older than Molly, letting it mingle with the sweetness of chopped onions and the faint warmth of rosemary pulled from the yard that morning. It had been years since she cooked like this, for herself, for joy, for the gentle kind of hunger that had nothing to do with obligation. The envelope from Uncle Ron still sat unopened on the end of the counter. She wasn't avoiding it. She was letting it wait its turn. Instead, she pulled a ceramic dish from the oven. Lemon roasted chicken thighs, crisp-skinned and glazed with honey and mustard seed. Beside it, couscous with charred zucchini. And for dessert, a loaf of cinnamon tea bread she'd wrapped in a linen towel, just as Gloria knocked on the back door and let herself in. "Something smells like closure," Gloria said, shrugging off her coat. Marianne grinned. "You're early. You're cooking again. I wasn't about to be late." Molly arrived 10 minutes later with tulips and a bottle of wine that didn't match the food but made sense anyway. The table was set for 3, no place cards, no placeholders, no seats left empty in the name of hope. They sat with glasses filled and plates heavy, the kind of dinner that didn't try to impress, just knew what it was: comfort, properly salted. "Is this rosemary from your garden?" Molly asked between bites. Marianne nodded. "The ones I tried to kill last spring. Turns out they're resilient." "Imagine that," Gloria muttered, raising her glass. They laughed. Not at anyone, not even at Jason. Just from the kind of release that only comes when you stop pretending disappointment is still a surprise. It became tradition after that. The first Sunday of every month. No invites. Just a standing agreement that didn't need ink. Some months it was chili and cornbread. Others, roast pork and root vegetables, or spring pasta tossed with herbs and lemon. They once had a spread that was nothing but soups and breads. Marianne called it February Logic. They brought what they had. Gloria with her homemade pickles and sharp tongue. Molly with her stories from the non-profit clinic, where she'd just accepted a full-time job. Marianne always had something rising in the oven or steeping on the stove. By the third dinner, Molly showed up with a gift-wrapped package. Inside, a blank spiral-bound recipe book with a soft lavender cover and the words "Real Meals for Peaceful Women," written in cursive across the front. Marianne traced the lettering with her thumb. "You made this?" "I had it printed," Molly said, cheeks pink. "There's a place online that does custom journals. I figured you'd need somewhere to put all this." Gloria leaned over the table to inspect it. "Peaceful Women, huh? Feels like false advertising." Marianne smiled as she turned the first page. "Peaceful doesn't mean passive." Molly nodded. "Exactly." They ate until the candles burned low and the tea went cold. At the end of the night, Gloria helped load the dishwasher, while Molly scribbled the couscous recipe into the journal, adding a note beside it. Best when shared with women who don't lie to themselves. That night, after they'd gone, Marianne curled up in the living room chair with a throw blanket and the lavender recipe book still in her lap. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't reach for persuasion or the envelope still sitting quietly in the kitchen. She flipped open the journal instead and wrote the title of the first recipe. Lemon rosemary chicken thighs requires patience. So do most good things. She smiled. Then, in the top corner of the page, she jotted a note. Not a recipe, not a quote. Just a truth that had followed her into this new season like a shadow finally at rest. The hunger wasn't just mine, but the kitchen always was. She closed the book gently, like tucking in a child. The next morning, the mail arrived late. Molly was already at work. Gloria was at the co-op dropping off her glass bottles. The house was still and sunlit, full of the kind of quiet that didn't ache. Among the mail, a bank statement, a thank you note from the library, and one heavy padded envelope with no return address. Inside, Uncle Ron's ledger, and beneath it, a single sealed envelope addressed in his unmistakable hand, to be opened by Marianne Whitaker, and no one else. She held it in both hands for a moment, then peeled the flap open with her thumbnail. The first line stopped her breath. What I never told Jason about your first marriage, and why I forgave you when no one else did. She sat down. The cinnamon bread cooled behind her, untouched. The courthouse smelled faintly of toner and stale coffee. Air-conditioned permanence, as if the walls themselves had been trained not to care who was right. Marianne sat near the front, spine straight, glasses low on her nose. Her navy sweater matched the legal folder beside her, every document tabbed and indexed like a small act of rebellion. Ethan Rollins leaned in from the next chair. You've done everything right, he murmured. He can't touch a line of it. I know, she said. Her tone wasn't smug, just steady, like a woman who'd already lived through worse verdicts. At the far table, Jason fidgeted with his tie. He hadn't shaved properly, and his jaw twitched every time the clerk shuffled papers. Beside him sat an unfamiliar attorney, a younger man with nervous eyes and a briefcase too new for the room. Amber sat in the row behind, her phone in her lap, scrolling as if she wished she were anywhere else. The case, Whitaker versus Whitaker, wasn't about money, not technically. It was a petition to invalidate Marianne's living trust on the basis of possible diminished capacity. The same accusation she'd already survived once, but this time Jason had filed it in open court, as if exposure could make it truer. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Marianne did too, calm and deliberate. What followed was clinical: dates, affidavits, signatures. Ethan spoke precisely, without theatrics. He referenced the earlier evaluation, the notary witness, the documentation of her codicil. He even presented a photo from the ribbon cutting at the library, Marianne reading to a circle of children, demonstrating, he said, consistent engagement, purpose, and comprehension. Jason's lawyer tried to argue pattern of manipulation, citing her gift to Molly as suspiciously timed. The judge barely looked up. There's no legal prohibition against gratitude, he said flatly. When it was over, the decision came fast. The court found Marianne fully competent. All documents, her will, trust, codicil, and proxy, were affirmed as valid and enforceable. Jason lost before he could even lose his temper. As the judge exited, Ethan gathered the papers into his briefcase and turned to her. He expected you to be weak, he said quietly. You're nothing but clear. Marianne adjusted her glasses, meeting his eyes. Clarity's what scared him most. Jason stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. So that's it, he barked. You get to just rewrite everything, pretend I don't exist? Marianne's voice didn't rise. You exist, Jason. You just stopped showing up. That's rich, he said, bitter. You freeze me out, play saint at the library, and call it justice? She folded her hands. I call it peace. Something I hope you find, but not in my pantry. Amber looked up from her phone then, startled. Jason turned as if to pull her toward him. But she stayed seated, eyes down, face unreadable. He scoffed. Fine. Keep your perfect little family dinners. I'm done. He walked out, the door slamming hard enough to make the flags tremble. Amber didn't follow. For a long moment, no one spoke. The bailiff coughed softly, rearranging papers just to break the silence. Then Ethan leaned closer. "That pantry line," he said. "That's going in my next closing argument." Marianne almost smiled. "Bill me for royalties." That evening, the three women met again, this time not at the courthouse, but back in Marianne's kitchen, as the late light slanted across the counter and the oven hummed low. Molly set down a grocery bag and pulled out a loaf of sourdough, a jar of fig jam, and a bottle of wine with a handwritten tag to new beginnings that were overdue. Gloria poured the wine into mismatched glasses. "Well," she said, raising hers, "to the woman who just made perjury look boring." Marianne laughed. "To the woman who didn't have to." They clinked glasses and sat. Molly had been quiet all evening, studying her grandmother with an expression that carried both relief and awe. Finally, she spoke. "I don't want what he wanted," she said softly. "The house, the money, the control. I want what you had." Marianne tilted her head. "And what's that?" "Enough courage to know what's yours, and not hand it away to be loved." Gloria let out a low whistle. "That's going in my next toast." Marianne reached across the table, taking Molly's hand. "Then start with this," she said. She stood, walked to the sideboard, and returned with the lavender spiral-bound notebook. "Real Meals for Peaceful Women," Molly read, smiling. "I thought you'd fill it with recipes," Marianne said. "Turns out it's full of reminders." Molly opened it, flipping past pages marked with neat handwriting: chili with cornbread, rosemary chicken, a scribbled line that read, "Peaceful doesn't mean passive." Marianne watched her trace the ink with her fingertips. "It's yours now," she said. "Keep cooking, keep writing things down, especially the truths that hurt." Molly blinked back tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll eat," Marianne replied. "The rest will follow." They finished dinner slowly, laughter threading between them like steam off the plates. Gloria told an off-color story about her first marriage. Marianne pretended to be scandalized. Molly nearly choked on her wine. When the dishes were cleared and the house grew quiet again, Marianne stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and faintly metallic, rain on its way. She looked down the street, half expecting headlights, half hoping for none. Instead, she saw a shape at the mailbox: Amber. She wasn't holding a phone this time, just a manila envelope, the same kind Ron's ledger had arrived in. She placed it inside the mailbox, hesitated, then looked up toward the porch light. Their eyes met across the distance, neither hostile nor forgiving, just recognition, raw and human. Amber turned and walked back to her car. Marianne stayed where she was, one hand on the doorframe, listening to the sound of rain beginning to fall. When she finally crossed the lawn and opened the mailbox, the envelope inside was damp at the edges. On the front, written in block letters, were 3 words: "For Grandma only." The new house was smaller, just 2 bedrooms, a porch swing, and a garden bed out back where she could grow basil and beets if she felt like it. Marianne called it a house that fits my actual life, not the one I was trying to keep up with. Gloria had rolled her eyes when she first walked in. "About damn time," she said, dropping a tin of cookies on the new butcher block counter. Marianne unpacked slowly. No rush, no pressure, just a deliberate decision to only bring what felt like her. The lavender recipe notebook, her favorite saucepan, the quilt she and Molly had once stitched together during a snowstorm before everything went sideways. Molly visited every Saturday. Sometimes she brought bread or secondhand books. Sometimes just herself and 1,000 questions she hadn't dared ask before. What was your first real heartbreak? Why didn't you leave sooner? What do you think made you stay? Marianne didn't dodge. She answered each one like she was stirring something, slowly, steadily, letting it breathe before serving the truth. Gloria taught Molly to sew at the dining table, pinning patterns over old pillowcases. "We mend because we can," she said one afternoon. "And because buying new doesn't fix what tore." On Marianne's birthday, a card came in the mail from Ethan Rollins. No signature, just a note inside. Still got it. She left it on the fridge. That spring, Molly launched a podcast through the nonprofit where she now worked full-time. Inheritance, Rewritten. She asked Marianne to be the first voice. They sat at the kitchen table with a mic clipped to a napkin holder. Marianne read The Country Bunny and the Little Gold Shoes. Voice calm, unrushed. Afterward, Molly didn't stop the recorder. "Can I ask you something extra?" Marianne nodded. "When did you start choosing for yourself?" She looked out the window, where a dogwood bloomed against the fence. "I used to be quiet because I thought it kept the house standing," she said. "Now I'm quiet because I've already said everything I need to, and the right people heard it." Molly didn't speak, just pressed her hand over Marianne's. That night, after everyone had gone, Marianne made a cup of peppermint tea and opened the last drawer in her desk. Amber's envelope still sat there, for Grandma only. She'd read it once, she'd read it again, but not tonight.